Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are at the start of the 2030 to 2031 offseason, and it's going to be a busy offseason for our Wings. We've got the 18th biggest budget in baseball for next year, and you can see right now we've got the 8th biggest player payroll, and we've actually got money to spend. But that's only because we pulled our scouting and player development budgets down to bare bones levels that I would never voluntarily go into next season with. So we need to pare a fair amount of salary from our team. And we'll get into that decision making to some degree in this episode. I don't know how far we'll go because I'm going to want a lot of time to think about some of the different options and different permutations that are possible. But towards the end of our last episode, we shopped Marcelo Meyer, who has been our starting shortstop for the last few seasons, and we thought he was going to be our starting shortstop of the future. He's good defensively, he's good offensively, but he's out with a fractured left elbow. And this is the second time in a little over 2 years that he's had broken bones in that elbow. He's already fragile in terms of his injury proneness, so my concerns are that he comes back wrecked rather than fragile, and or some of his defensive and or batting ratings regress also coming off of this injury. And given the amount of money we've got tied up in him for the next half decade, if either or both of those things happen, he could be a very problematic contract for a team with the budget that we are likely to have. And when I shopped him at the end of the past episode, there is a lot of demand for him because obviously shortstops who are plus defensively and plus offensively do not grow on trees. So there's teams willing to take him on board. Again, in most cases, sending a reasonably sized salary back to us, but not in all cases. So I think that we felt like we needed to either get rid of Adley Rutschman, Shohei Ohtani, or Marcelo Meyer this offseason, or another option was to get rid of a closer like Munoz along with a few other contracts and try to get 30-ish million off the books that way. But given that the potential returns for Ohtani were minimal, Rutschman currently has a no trade clause. Well, he'll always have a no trade clause. He's currently not willing to waive it. I think there is potential that he'll waive it at some point or be willing to waive it at some point this offseason. But he is still a well above average defensive catcher who is a well above average offensive player, too. He's been an all-star for us, both of his seasons with us. And hasn't had health issues. I think as some viewers, most notably Patrick DeBonis, has noted, that contract in the out years could definitely become, and probably more likely than not will become, a problem for us. But right now, although the contract is expensive, he's one of the best, if not the best, catchers in baseball. So there's part of me, and with the no trade clause, we can't get anything for him right now. Again, maybe we can get something in the off season if he's willing to waive it around the winter meetings. But we could take Meyer off the books and be saving $25 million-ish a year for the next several seasons, and get rid of the uncertainty that he comes back and he is a shell of what he used to be. And if we take off Meyer and also potentially trade away either an Andres Munoz or a Cade Smith, the two guys we have who are experienced closers, that is going to free up about $35 million getting rid of the two of them. Then if we follow the advice that some of you have given and maybe think about Jace Young or a Jace Barofin or a Nick York or a Sean Sullivan or an Emerson Talavera or a Takao Ota, some of the other arbitration eligible players, maybe move on from a couple of them as well. We're going to be able to free up a lot of money so we can invest in scouting and player development and actually have some money left to hopefully replenish our team a bit. I am not intending this to be a teardown and a rebuild. I think we can take a contract or two off of the books, hopefully get creative in the offseason, get creative in the trade market, get creative in the Rule 5 draft, and hopefully next year still be a playoff team for a fourth consecutive season. So are we going to be as good on paper, potentially without a Marcelo Meyer? No. But I think we can still put together a team that will compete next year in a much more economical way. So I am going to be exploring all of that in this episode, but again, some of those decisions may take me time to make. So before I jump into that, I want to make sure that there's some actual content in this episode that some of you have asked for. So we're going to do our annual visit right now of prospects that we have either failed to draft, failed to sign in international amateur free agency, decided against, had in our system and traded away, traded for and then traded away, etc. To kind of see where some of these other guys who are not in our system right now are doing and what their futures look like. And who knows, maybe we'll see somebody that we like the way they're developing and we try to include them in a trade if we do end up trading away someone with a lot of value like a Marcelo Meyer. And the first guy to check in on is Josh Blevins, a prospect who we considered taking number 1 overall the year that we decided to pivot and go with Deshaun Seifu instead. Seifu was a college player who's ended up being a pretty productive player for us in parts of 5 seasons technically in the major leagues, because he did come up right at the end of his first professional season, but he's had 3 full seasons in the majors, plus half a season, plus a cup of coffee. In that time period, though, he's led the league in triples 3 times and led the league in stolen bases 3 times, while winning a couple of Gold Glove awards and being named to a couple of all-star teams. So he's obviously been very productive for us, and we're very happy to have acquired him at number 1 overall. But we were really tempted by Blevins' bat. He ended up being drafted 10th overall by the Angels. And this past season, actually, he was traded by the Angels to Boston, and then Boston traded him a few weeks later to the Cubs organization, which is kind of crazy. So this year he hit 246 and 361 in a couple of stints in rookie ball, first with Boston and then with the Cubs. Hit 254 in A ball and then a $168 in high A ball. So a very busy season for Mr. Blevins, but he's almost 23 years old right now. Best case scenario, if he completely develops, he looks like he'll be a bit above average as a major league hitter. He is durable, so he'll be on the lineup every day, but doesn't bring anything to the table defensively, not too much on the base paths either. So feel like our decision to go with Seifu over Blevins was a good one, and thanks again to those of you who shared feedback a few weeks ago when we were making this decision and helped push us towards going with Deshaun Seifu, because I think that one worked out pretty well for us. Derek Boot is an international amateur free agent that we really liked back in 2025. We ended up signing a couple of pitchers for discount amounts early in the period and didn't have enough money to compete with the Cubs to bring him on board. He's viewed as the number 64 prospect in baseball at this point. He actually spent the entire year in A-ball after they had promoted him to high A at the end of last season, which is a little odd. Only hit 247, but did have 18 homers and 21 doubles and 396 at-bats. Certainly, if he fully develops, looks like he could be an interesting bat with some pretty good home run power and an excellent eye. But he is almost 24 years old at this point, too, so he definitely has not developed as rapidly and as close to his ceiling as perhaps the Cubs did when they spent a lot of money, 4.5 plus million dollars, to sign him back in 2025. And you can see he's gone from being one of the top handful of prospects in baseball to number 64 at this point. Still a very good prospect, but another guy that hasn't quite lived up to expectations. And honestly, that's to be expected somewhat. There's tons of players in each draft who looks like they have all-star potential ceilings when you talk to your scouts when they're teenagers particularly. And over time, some small percentage of them will end up being perennial all-stars and Hall of Famers. And the majority of them are never really going to make much of an impact at the major leagues. And that's the way it works in real life. And that's the way it works in this game, too. And as much as I rail about some of the things with OOTP's programming that I don't like, I think with prospects and the very high percentage of them that ultimately wash out or don't reach the heights of their potential ceilings, I think OOTP does a really good job of simulating real life in that regard. And Mike Goodwin is a prospect that we passed on in 2028. At his heights, he is Deshaun Seifu with a much better eye. Durable, lots of speed, probably not as good, or definitely not as good defensively as Seifu. But certainly if he reaches his potential in terms of contact, gap power, eye, and avoiding strikeouts, he's got a very high ceiling still. Viewed as the number 62 prospect in baseball. Split this year between high A ball, where he hit 281 with 13 homers, and then he got promoted to double A, where he hit a .174 and 46 at-bats for the Rocket City Trash Pandas towards the end of the season. So he still has a lot of developing to do, but he's also only barely 21 years old, so the fact that he made it to double A this year, he looks like he's still on target if he continues developing to be a pretty impactful major league player. And Roman Maples is a shortstop that we really liked in the 2027 draft, and still looks like he's going to be pretty good defensively with that 70 range. The bat is the question. If he fully develops, still could be an interesting major league bat with that plus contact and plus gap power, average-ish home run power. He spent this entire season in high A ball, where he hit 229 and struck out 165 times and 477 at-bats. So those are certainly the negatives. But he did have 24 doubles, 3 triples, and 11 homers. Has a lot of growth that he needs to do with a minus 28 weighted runs above average, or in his case below average, and his OPS plus and his WRC plus were also well below average. That said, he was still a positive WAR player thanks to his defense. Hasn't developed quite as I would have hoped he would if we had drafted him, but at 22 years old, still has potential with that glove to be an impactful major league player if the bat develops a bit further. Juan Big C Estrada is a pitcher we considered taken in the 2028 draft. Ended up going 30th overall out of junior college. 23-year-old left-handed pitcher is getting pretty close to major league ability when you look at his ratings. And somebody with really good stamina. He is also a guy who is a potential two-way player, or was a potential two-way player when we looked at him. And quite honestly, although his power, his home run power, is as bad as it can get, as bad as it can get, he still looks like he could be an interesting hitter at the major league level as well, particularly against right-handed pitching. But he has been a pitcher primarily this past season. Started 24 games in high A ball, went 3-11 with a 5.84 ERA. Did get promoted to Double A, where he was 2-1 with a 4.42 ERA. Definitely did better in the higher level of Double A than he did in high A ball. He, looking at his ratings, he may have been too good for that league. Because right now, Eastern League, he definitely looks like an above-average Eastern League pitcher already. So maybe part of the reason he was such a poor performer in high A ball was that he was frustrated by being down there, perhaps. But still certainly looks like a potentially very interesting pitcher. Doesn't look like he's been doing any batting at all. So one-way guy for his Altoona Curve team, where he finished off the 2030 season. And Danny Chiavarella is a guy that we thought about taking in the second round a year ago. Our scout wanted us to take him, and we were tempted by the potential to get a player who has potentially off-the-charts home run power and eye. But we went in a different direction. Thus far, he's struggled in rookie ball, hit 200 a year ago, and the batting average this year was actually worse when he hit a .184. Did have 6 homers and 125 at-bats, so not incredible power. Seems like it may have been a good miss by us, moving in a different direction than Mr. Chiavarella. And we've got 2 more players that we're going to look at, and these are both guys who used to be part of our system and used to be, in both cases, the top prospect in our system at one point or another, and we've moved on from both of them. And first up is Ali Ostendorf, who we picked second overall. I believe it was 2027. Yeah, second overall in 2027. So we picked him instead of one of the players that we mentioned a little ways back. I can't remember who it was. May have been Maples or Goodwin. I can't remember what year those guys were drafted. But Ali Ostendorf is a pitcher that we took second overall. He's viewed as the number 50 prospect in baseball right now. We traded him away this past year to bring on the center fielder Featherston, and we also got a pretty good pitching prospect in Isidro Ochoa back, although Ostendorf is more highly regarded and more highly rated. Our concern with Ostendorf over the past few years has been that his control is just not developing. You look at his ratings right now and his movements above major league average. He's got 4 average or close to average major league pitches, and his stuff isn't that far off. 21-year-old ground ball tendencies, throwing in the mid-90s, and he's durable. Everything except the control is going for him, but the control has been so bad that we gave up on him. And this past year, he split between rookie ball and A ball. In rookie ball, he was pretty effective finally, going 1-2 with a 3.06 ERA. You can see we had him in Class A Marathon at the end of last season, but they put him in rookie ball after they picked him up from us. You can see in Class A Marathon with us this year, he was 5-4 with a 5.62 ERA. So we were definitely trying to push him and stretch him because he's almost 22 years old, and we wanted to get him out of rookie ball. But Atlanta did kind of put him back at a level where he could be better, which is good. That said, he still walked 29 batters in 32 1/3 innings in A ball. And if he doesn't get that control straightened out, probably to at least a 40, there's just no prospect at all of him being a successful major league pitcher. And last but certainly not least is Andres Big Baby Medina, an international free agent signing of ours from several years ago, who was for several seasons the top prospect in our system. Uh, Loved him as a potential great guy in the clubhouse who was going to be a great defensive catcher for us. The question we've had, and we did have over the time that we had him before we traded him away in early 2027, was whether he was going to hit enough at the major league level. And positively, I can say that this year he spent the whole year in A ball, and he hit 264 with 17 homers and 60 ribbies, well above average in terms of his WRC plus in a WAR of close to 2.5, helped by his good defense. So the bat is still developing. It looks like his contact and his home run power, if everything works out, could be above average. The question is how bad his gap power and, probably more importantly, his eye and his avoid strikeouts end up. If all of those ratings remain in the 30s or only get up to about 40, he's not going to be a particularly effective major league hitter. But his contact and his home run power are finally coming along. That said, he's a 23-year-old who still hasn't made it above A ball. So although his great defense, his personality, and his durability are all big positives, there still are definitely some questions about whether he's ever going to hit enough to be a guy that you could play at the major league level. So seems like he's made a little bit of progress over the last 3 years since we moved on from him. But I guess it's been 4 seasons now since we moved on from him. Crazy how time flies. Going back to those years that he was in our system in rookie ball in 2025 and 2026, and the highest he ever hit at a 3 different stints across 2 seasons in rookie ball was a $194 for us in the DSL. And then after we traded him, he hit a $121 in as a 19-year-old in rookie ball. So it's been a very long and slow maturation process. But his batting averages did improve over time. And as I said, he did make it to A-ball this past year. So still has a chance of making it, but he's not going to be not going to be as good an offensive player as we thought maybe he could be when we were planning on having him as our catcher of the future. And obviously with that not working out, that's part of the reason that we ended up signing Adley Rutschman to that big contract a few years ago to stabilize the catcher position for us with a combination of excellent defense and really good offense that 5 or 6 years ago we thought Medina might be providing for us right now. So that was the review of some of the more interesting decisions we've had to make on prospects over the past several years of running the Buffalo Wings, who didn't end up in our organization or are no longer in our organization. But now we move on to the business at hand, which is improving our organization for next year. And we've decided we're definitely going to make arbitration offers to first baseman Takao Ota, who had 30 homers for us this year, and left fielder Vance Honeycutt, who, despite the fact that he's going to be recovering from that torn UCL, his number's not going to be huge for a player who's been one of our top offensive players ever since we put him into our major league lineup after drafting him out of, I believe it was Wake Forest, UNC. Samuel Basallo, we are going to try to bring back next year, but you look at Basallo, his arbitration estimate is about $7.3 million, and he is willing to sign a contract with us, but he wants about $30 million a year over 9 years to extend with us, and some insane numbers in here for a guy who, although he's admittedly been very successful as a hitter, he's a 2-time All-Star, a 2-time Silver Slugger, won the MVP in the Wild Card Series this past season, and was also a Rookie of the Year in 2028 was second in the NL with 41 homers this year. So it's very conceivable that he wins a third Silver Slugger this year in his third season in the majors as DH. But he really only is a DH. He's a well below average defensive catcher and a well below average first baseman. We played him in the field a little bit this year. His catcher ERA was close to 5. Just don't think he is a $30 million-ish a year player. So our plan with Basallo is to make him an offer for 1 year to try to bring him back next season because he is an important bat to us. But when we look at Mr. Basallo, his arbitration numbers, the 2 years after that are expected to be about $16 million and about $21 million. And unless he just has a monster season for us this coming year, and we think that his actual ability has improved, or his actual potential has improved from where we think it is right now, it's hard for me to imagine that this upcoming season isn't going to be our last year with him. I think at around $7 million for the type of offensive production he's given us, where 102 runs batted in is the worst season he's ever had in the majors, there's definitely $7 million of value there. But with his defensive limitations and the fact that he strikes out not quite at a Gallo-esque pace, but very frequently, and he's kind of a 250-ish type hitter, I don't know that I want to be spending $16 million for him the year after next. So we are going to make an offer to try to bring him back next year, but that could be it for him in a Buffalo Wings uniform, and perhaps next year at this time we'll be shopping him to see what type of assets we can get in return from a bigger market team that's willing to pay him $15+ million a year. And before we get into figuring out what our players are going to look like next year, we've got some work to do. You may remember that we let our bench coach's contract expire at the end of this season. Didn't like some of the decisions that he had made when we had delegated manager responsibilities and even in some cases lineup responsibilities to him. And he also didn't have the best relationship with players on our team, particularly pitchers. So there's some pretty talented bench coach potential options out there for us. But we're actually going to promote someone from within our organization. Carlos Crawford, hired him as our pitching coach in Jamestown this past season. He's 59 years old. He is incredibly talented. You can see he can do just about anything in terms of coaching. But he is outstanding with development, legendary with mechanics. He's conventional in his manager style. He's got a personality that will fit well with the people that are on our major league staff. And as a bench coach, he's also outstanding with catching defense, excellent with infield defense, and good with teaching running. So he can work with the base coaches and ensure that we've got really good coaching at the major league level. But perhaps even most importantly, we expect that he's going to have good relationships with the Wings, and he's also going to have really excellent relationships with the pitchers overall, and pretty darn good relationships with most of the everyday players as well. Only average relationships with the likes of Rutschman, Seifu, and Featherston, who are three pretty big and important players on the team. But if average relationship is the worst one he has, and it's with players who are basically fully developed, not the end of the world. So I think that Carlos Crawford is the best option for us, so we're going to promote him to bench coach at the major league level. Still need to find a team trainer, and we'll have one more opening among our minor leaguers as far as our coaches that we're going to need to fill. But Carlos Crawford is the guy that we're going to be relying on as our bench coach next year to help us with a lot of our decision making around the day-to-day running of the team. So we've got the rest of the offers made for our coaching staff in the minors, so hopefully we'll start hearing some acceptances over the next week or so in game time. But at this point, we've got to move on to the next day. Unfortunately, in real life, it's a different day than when I was doing the past episode, and the players who we had searched for as potential trade candidates for Marcelo Meyer are long gone from our frequently viewed pages. So, and we've also used up all of our opportunities to shop people for today. So we are going to move one day forward. And then what we are going to do is, with the 5 opportunities we have to shop players, we are going to, and you can see we're starting to hear back from a lot of those coaches that we are trying to get to join our organization. I guess I should make sure that they all like our offers, and thus far those that we have heard from do. So that is positive. Tigers interested in Isidro Ochoa, who, as I mentioned, is one of the guys we picked up when we traded away Ostendorf. Not looking to trade him right now. Anyways, back to what I was saying. So what we are going to do now that we have moved forward a day, we are going to shop 4 players that we may consider moving on from this offseason just to see what the markets look like for them. And then with our 5th shop of the day, we are going to shop Marcelo Meyer again. I'm really worried about what he's going to be like physically and what his skills are potentially going to be like after this major injury, second major injury, as I mentioned, in about 2.5 years to his left elbow. And if we can get some pretty good assets back in return for him, or one really good asset back in return for him, while taking a lot of salary off the books, we are certainly opening up a big hole at shortstop, whereas I've talked about he's good defensively and he's good offensively, and that combination is pretty rare. But if there is a situation or a position where I'm willing to go with a defense-only player, shortstop is certainly the position. If I had to go with one position on the lineup where I'm willing to deal with a guy who can't hit, it would be shortstop. And in Toshi Mitsukato, he only hit .223 for us this past year with a 68 OPS plus. But he does potentially have an excellent glove. I am not suggesting that he, here on November 3rd, is the guy that I want to be our starting shortstop 6 months from now. But if it ends up being a situation where, because of salary constraints and because of who's available on the market in free agency, who we're able to trade off of our team and bring back in trades, if we had to go with one guy on our major league roster who can't hit, a shortstop who is a potentially excellent fielder is the most obvious place that I would put a guy that can't hit. And certainly with his 70 range and his 70 error rating, a plus arm, and a really good turn double play rating, Toshi Mitsukatu is potentially a excellent defensive shortstop at the major league level. You can see his defensive efficiency at the position this year was actually a little bit below average, but he was generally a backup. When I look at those ratings, there's no reason why he shouldn't be an above average defensive player. Again, this is not base case. This is if we're unable to figure out anything else and we do trade Meyer away and we can't get an acceptable shortstop in return, or the Rule 5, or free agency, or a different trade. So there's a lot of levers for us to press over the next 5+ months until the season gets started. But knowing that I've got a pretty good defensive shortstop in my back pocket if I need it makes me feel a little less scared to potentially trade away Meyer. Even though, as I acknowledged, Cotto's bat does scare me, and I don't know that he's going to hit enough to really be able to hold down a full-time job in the majors. But we're looking to cut payroll, and if that's what we have to end up doing, that's what we have to end up doing. So Nick York has been for the last several years for us a poor man's version of Samuel Basallo, a guy who has had a pretty decent bat over the course of his major league career, but he's coming off of his worst season, and he really doesn't bring much to the table in terms of defense. Expected to make around $3.5 million this coming year. I think he's a guy that we could conceivably look to move on from. I don't know how much value and interest there's really going to be in him, but we'll shop him and at least find out. And yeah, there's not a ton of big time interest in Nick York. Catcher Antonio Gomez wouldn't be a bad backup catcher. Great arm, a little bit above average defensively. Doesn't hit all that much. Definitely struggles at the major league level. Not the most interesting guy in the world. Andre Palante is a pitcher I think we looked at a few years ago, maybe when he was a free agent. Looks like a replacement level-ish guy. Not the most exciting opportunities for the likes of Nick York, but that's what we're trying to find out right now. Just not even necessarily what we can get for these guys straight up is most important, but if we need them to supplement another trade, some of these guys that we may not want to have back next year, we want to kind of get a sense of what the market is like. Cade Smith came in and did a pretty good job in a small sample size as our closer this year when he took over in that role from Munoz. His arbitration number expected to be about $7.5 million. We're not going to bring back both Munoz and Smith, so I want to kind of see what, if any, interest there is in Cade Smith. So we'll shop him around. And it looks like there's a little more interest in him, at least in terms of the number of players that were being offered. For the most point, obviously I'm doing this live with you, so I haven't dug in to see in details how all of these players' ratings actually look, but looks like most of them are replacement level-ish type players, but there's at least a lot of options with a player like him. D'Angelo Sarmiento of the Mets is versatile defensively, not really much of a hitter though. Peyton Love is a bat in field. Don't love the personality, but looks like a potentially useful-ish major league arm. Ryan Watson, decent reliever who's fragile. So definitely not overwhelmed with what we can get for Cade Smith, but he probably does have a little bit of value in the trade market. Another arbitration eligible player that we are likely to move on from is, well, two of them are Ji-Hoo Kim and Miguel Segura. I just don't think there's going to be much value at all in Segura, who we picked up off of waivers. Kim is a guy who was 12-7 for us last year. Ended up in the bullpen with us for most of this season. Just don't know that I want to be spending $1.5 million on him at 35 years old next year when his profile looks like a marginal major leaguer at this point. I'm guessing there's not going to be a crazy amount of interest in him, but gotta find out for sure. yeah, Josh Martin and Peyton Love is a Battenfield are our only options for him. I'm guessing it would be a pretty similar list for the likes of Segura. So I'm not going to shop him right now. The guy that I'm going to shop, and I know this will make some of you pleased, because a couple episodes ago, a couple of you brought up that Jace Barofin, who was the first round draft pick in the history of the Buffalo Wings organization and has been up with us since the start, all 5 seasons that we've been in the majors, but his production is kind of moving in the wrong direction. He's kind of an average-ish major league bat. He can play all 3 positions in the outfield. Don't feel great about him in center field. Good personality, but certainly not a big-time player. And he's going to be making $5 to $6 million a year over the next 4 or 5 seasons. I don't think there's going to be a ton of interest in him at his price point, but just kind of want to know what, if any, options there are to get him off the books. And you can see there's nobody who's interested in him. So doesn't mean that we can't get rid of him. It just means that we're not going to extract much value if we try to trade him away and move on. But with those 4 player shops done, it's time to get serious about Marcelo Meyer. So we are going to shop him around again and see this big list, unless things have changed a lot since yesterday. And no, they have not. I mean, there's a ton of interest in him. So I am going to spare you from me going through this list one by one and figuring out a couple of potentially key targets for us. It is kind of interesting that there's a lot of catchers, some pretty high quality catchers who we can get in return for him. But given that we're unlikely to move on from Mr. Rutschman this offseason, we may have to look to get a little bang for our buck in a different position. But I'm not going to subject you to me perusing this entire massive list of players as in my obsessiveness over OOTP. I want to make sure that I put together the best trade or trade options possible for Mr. Meyer. But I am going to peruse this list now and see if maybe there's a couple of trade offers I can put out there and potentially free up a lot of money in our budgetary situation by moving on from one of the best all-around players on our team, if he's healthy. And I've made an offer for Meyer that was rejected, and I'm sure some of you are going to think I'm crazy when I was even thinking about doing this. And you can see that I have to either add in our closer, Andres Munoz, first baseman Takao Ota, or left fielder Vance Honeycutt to make it work. But we were going to send the 27-year-old Meyer to Nashville for 36-year-old shortstop Dansby Swanson. But we were going to have Nashville retain 60% of his contract. So essentially we would have been on the hook for about $8 million a year for the next 2 seasons, assuming his vesting option kicked in. So we'd be taking a lot of money off the books, and we would actually be upgrading a bit defensively to Swanson. I don't think the bat of Swanson is quite as good as Meyer, but for a excellent defensive shortstop, it's still a fine bat. He's been above average in the majors for the last few years in terms of his production offensively, and he's also normal in terms of his injury proneness. So my thought is this trade would get Meyer off of our books and allow us to potentially not deal with the uncertainty about what he looks like physically and what he looks like in his ratings coming back after this serious injury, but still give us a really good shortstop for the next 2 seasons. We're not making a long-term commitment to him, and we're getting them to keep a lot of his money. But it lets us get money off the books, but keep this team that we think still can be competitive these next 2 years with Shohei Ohtani on the team as our number one pitcher, and kind of Ohtani and Swanson are lined up with us for potentially the next 2 seasons. They both actually would have vesting options for the second of those seasons. And then when all of that money comes off the books in 2 years, then we can reset once again if we need to, but we are not rebuilding, but retooling. I don't want to get rid of Honeycutt, even though he also is coming off of a pretty serious injury, but he's not making a ton of money next year, most likely, and I'd like to see what he looks like on the other side of his injury. Ota, I've made an arbitration offer to him. I'd consider him. He doesn't bring a lot defensively, but as I said, his offensive production is steadily improved as he's gotten used to playing in the United States. And I think for around $4 million next year, maybe a little less, he's going to be pretty good value. And I had kind of convinced myself to keep Munoz as our closer because I think he is a little bit better than Cade Smith. Throws a lot harder than Cade Smith, and he's making a little bit more money than Cade Smith. But I don't know if I want to give up any of those guys right now, but I would throw Cade Smith, who's a pretty big-time reliever, into this deal and at least see what the Stars have to say about that, since we want to get Cade Smith off the books anyways. Maybe that makes the deal slightly more palatable on their side. And it wasn't an immediate no, so we'll probably hear from them tomorrow as to what the options are. In the meantime, since we've moved forward another day, might as well see what we can potentially get for, or I guess, have we moved forward? Or no, we haven't moved forward another day because they gave us that response on the same day. So let me move forward one more day and maybe we'll hear more from Nashville. We're not doing well with all of our coaches, unfortunately. Diamondbacks looking for the good minor leaguer Rodolfo Carmona. Tigers looking for the minor league prospect Tim Gaglia, offering us a generic major league reliever. And it says we are an almost with Nashville now. But almost, as those of you who play this game know, can mean a lot of things. Almost can mean throw in a 27-year-old with 1-star potential and the deal is complete. Almost could mean, yeah, just add Deshaun Seifu to the deal and the deal's complete. And we are still in a position where they're looking for pretty big players. So adding in Cade Smith opened up a little more optionality for us. But they're still really looking for big-time players from us. The guy that has me tempted is Takao Ota, because we could have done it straight up with him. I like his bat, and I think he's pretty good value still. And his fielding this past year was not horrible at first base. It's just such a unimportant position defensively in OOTP that I don't mind that his traits are not great there. So Cade Smith helped a little bit on the margins. But it basically just gave a few other pretty important major league players that we can include to get the deal done. So we are not quite where we want to be yet. So since we have moved a day ahead now, while we are considering what to do with Marcelo Meyer and Dansby Swanson, we'll shop some of these other players just to get a sense of their markets. I'm guessing Segura, there's not going to be much of a market at all for him, but we will see. There's actually more of a market for him than there was for some of the other players, but not a lot of big-time players who we can potentially pick up for him. I don't know that I really want to trade Sean Sullivan. I'm leaning towards giving an arbitration offer to him, but at least want to see what, if any, type of market there is for Mr. Sullivan. Pretty minimal. Emerson Talavera, we might as well just find all of these arbitration eligible guys that are not indispensable. What type of interest there is among other teams for them. Talavera, Tyrese Turner seems to be a frequent guy on the list of people that we can get back and trade for a lot of these players. I'm actually going to just shop Takao Ota right now, because if they're that interested in him, maybe some other people are really interested in Ota. Yeah, and Ota actually has a long list of people that we could get for him, including catcher Campbell Smithwick, who's been up for 3 years now, so he's going to start making some money this coming year. $3 million is a lot to pay for a backup catcher. But if we could bring a Campbell Smithwick on board, and then if Mr. Rutschman were at some point willing to let go of his no-trade clause, that would give us an opportunity to really completely reshape this roster in terms of its content as well as the financial situation. Edgar Zamora, not quite as good a hitter, it doesn't look like, as Campbell Smithwick. But there's definitely demand for Takao Ota. Tommy Specht was a guy that I looked at for Meyer as well. He's a guy who was a Rule 5 pick just a year ago. I'm guessing he got picked before we could see him, or maybe we just had a horrible scouting report on him, but he would have been somewhat attractive to me, I think, with ability to play left or right, a little bit of speed, a decent-looking bat. He hit .265 with 27 homers and 32 steals for Atlanta last year, so a excellent Rule 5 acquisition for them, and a guy who's not making a lot of money that we could pick up for Ota as well. Our old buddy Shane Bieber, what did he do since he's left us? Split last year between the Cubs and the Orioles. 3-7, 4.54 ERA with the Cubs, 3-4, 5.03 ERA with the Orioles. So I think we extracted the best years out of him at bargain basement levels, and now he's making a lot of money in his mid-30s with another team. So I think we did a pretty good job while we had Bieber. So Ota's got some value, which is good to know. The question is, do we keep Ota, or do we try to extract that value from Ota to either bring on Dansby Swanson or to bring on a different player? I kind of would like to keep Ota around. He's a pretty solid hitter against right-handed pitching. I don't typically play him against left-handed pitching if I can help it, but that bat is still pretty interesting to me. And some good news as we continue to try to negotiate with the Stars. Vance Honeycutt has signed his contract. Fans happy to have him on board. We've also signed a bunch of guys in our minor league system to extensions. Looks like some of our young prospects are really happy. Nashville says we are almost there, and we actually are almost there because we're at a point now where we can have lesser prospects get the deal done. So I'll let you know what we've put together at this point. Marcelo Meyer is obviously the cornerstone of it, making a ton of money, good defensive shortstop, good hitter, coming off of his first All-Star appearance. Not even yet 28 years old, but we've got him signed for a lot of money going forward that we can't afford the contract, but we have to get rid of someone making this kind of money, or a group of someone's making this kind of money to clear up the books. With the fact that he was fragile before he had this fractured elbow that has kept him out for, about 7 months when all is said and done, I do worry what he looks like on the other side of that. So he's the cornerstone of it. We've had to add in Cade Smith, who is one of 2 closers we have on our team. Getting rid of him will clear about $7 million off the books for next year. Clearly would love to have him, but we can't afford to be paying $7.5 million to Cade Smith while also paying $10 million to Andres Munoz. And right now, I think I'd rather keep Munoz. We've added in the 19-year-old minor league left fielder Luis Montoya, not a big-time prospect. And then we added in the right-handed pitcher Miguel Segura, who we picked up on waivers. His arbitration number is going to be about $1.5 million this coming year. He didn't pitch all that well for us, although we do like his profile. Looking over the course of his career, he's been a average-ish, maybe a bit above average, perhaps overall when you look at all of his metrics combined. Major league pitcher, but not great pitcher, and a guy who we were thinking about trying to move on from. And we would get Swanson in return, and they would keep 60% of his contract. Like I said, he's an upgrade defensively, modestly, but still overall an upgrade defensively in terms of his ratings from Meyer. Probably not quite as good a bat as Meyer, but still a good, solid, professional hitter who has been an above-average offensive player for the last 3 seasons. And when you look over the course of his career, he's really a league average-ish type of player as far as his offense. But he's put up a 48 WAR over his career. A lot of that, I'm sure, from his defense. And although he's making $20 million for the next couple years, well, this year and then potentially this upcoming season, and then potentially a vesting option for the year after that. If he plays 135 games and the vesting option kicks in, we would have the Braves, not the Braves, he's not with the Braves anymore. It's 2030 in a fictional world. He's with the Nashville Stars now. But we'd basically still be set at shortstop for the next 2 seasons. And as I mentioned, if we had Swanson on board, both him and Ohtani have a vesting option after this season. If they both play well and are healthy, we'd be happy if those vesting options kick in for the amount of money. One more run with the 2 of them in their late 30s, and then we move on from both of them for the 2033 season and clear a lot of money off of our books. And we no longer have to give up only big-time players to get the deal done at this point. I am thinking I am just going to do this. And I know, well, I don't know. I think some of you will not like this trade. Because I think some of you think I should just completely rebuild. But we're a team that's made the playoffs 3 straight years. We've got a lot of young players who are getting better. I don't think we need to rebuild. I think we need to have a different cost structure, and that means we need to have different players on the team. But I don't think this is a rebuild. I think this is a cut some salary, reload, and try to compete next year. And we're getting some serious salary off the books, with what we're going to be potentially paying Swanson next year. That's basically pretty similar to what we'd be paying Cade Smith. So we're still getting the $26-27 million that Meyer would be getting paid off the books completely. And we do have some young shortstops in the minors coming up through our system. Will they be ready in a year or two when Swanson is potentially gone? Probably not quite. But he is a potential bridge to youth in our system. So I am going to get greedy here, though. I am going to put Trevor Sharp into this deal, which is good enough to get it done. I can complete the trade right now. But I'm going to tick their retention to Swanson up to 70% and see what they have to say. And they say, no way at 70%. We're back to needing to do big players. So, okay. Well, let's add Trevor Sharp in and see what they say at 65%. And we'll probably hear from them tomorrow. And we're still signing some minor league free agents in our system. We signed Basallo to his extension, trying to work on some of our coaches, getting some trade proposals. I'll look at these very quickly. They're just looking for our young, good prospects. Tim Hull is one of those guys who is a shortstop coming up through our system, or a potential shortstop. You can see I'm forcing him at third base right now. But he could potentially play shortstop for us at some point. Not perfect defensively for short. Guy we picked in the 3rd round in 2026. The question is how much his bat develops. Hit .285 with 26 doubles and 17 homers in Double-A this year. I think he's a great utility infielder at the major league level. I'm not sure if he's an everyday shortstop, but he's one of the guys who is a year or two away who could potentially be taking over for Swanson for us if we do bring him on board. And speaking of bringing Swanson on board, let's see what they have to say if we want them to keep 65% of his money. And yeah, they're looking for a still big-time player just for that other 5%. So I think what that means is we have to go back hat in hand and say, we will give you Trevor Sharp, and we will only have you retain 60% of Dansby Swanson's contract. And we will make this trade getting Marcelo Meyer and all of the big money that he's owed for the next 5 or 6 years and the uncertainty about his health off of our books. Meyer, 20, I guess it's 4 to 5 years, 27 this upcoming season, 26, 25, 24, and then a team option for 33 million. So he's signed for the next 4 to 5 years. But we get 27 million off the books for the upcoming season and are obviously clearing a lot of money for subsequent seasons. We get about 7 million off the books with Cade Smith, get a minimum contract off with Montoya. Segura was going to be making about $1.5 million next year if we kept him in arbitration, but he was a marginal guy anyways. So we are clearing a lot of money, and we're bringing about 8 million back. So essentially we're still getting 28-ish million dollars off the books by making this trade. And we're trying to remain competitive because, as I said, we're actually upgrading our defense at short. We're downgrading a little bit in offense. Swanson's an average offensive player, but an average offensive player at short with an excellent glove and a good personality in the clubhouse for the $8.2 million a year that we would be responsible for this season and next season if the option vests is something that I want to do. And I know that there's going to be some of you in the comments who say, there'll probably be some of you who say, hey, the fact that you got anything for Marcelo Meyer to get him off the books is a big plus. But I think there's probably going to be more people who say you probably should have tried to get a younger prospect that you could build around for Meyer. And I get it. I do. But I am still going to get this deal done. Dansby Swanson is going to be the Buffalo Wings shortstop of the near term. And the other thing about this I should have mentioned was that Swanson's a pretty popular player. Marcelo Meyer was obviously very popular. Cade Smith, popular. Segura, fans liked. But Swanson, a very popular player, so he'll help offset some of the losses of those popular players as well. So a monster deal. We'll have to see what Marcelo Meyer looks like next year in the spring after he comes back from that injury. Taking a look at our front office, fan interest is 100. We've got money available now. We can actually have some type of scouting budget. Obviously, we're not going to finish these things right now, and we're hoping we can put a lot more money into them because our work is not done by any stretch of the imagination, but got $12 million available now with at least money in scouting and player development. And now when we think about salary arbitration, we've made the offer to Ota. We didn't have to get rid of him to get Swanson on board, which I think is good. We've still got guys like York, Talavera, Kim, and Sullivan that we need to decide on. We still want to decide on whether we want to have Jace Barofin back next year or not. But we are at least in a situation where we've taken a lot of money off the books. I'd say for next season, Swanson may be an upgrade, given that it's conceivable that Meyer, within abbreviated spring training, even if everything goes well, is going to be a fragile player, and we don't know what he's going to look like. We're definitely weaker in the bullpen, trading away Cade Smith, but we were going to get rid of Smith or Munoz to clear off some money. It was just a matter of which one, and I decided to go with Munoz. And then other than that, it was a relief pitcher we really didn't want in Segura, and it was essentially Meyer for Swanson. Got better defense, a little worse offense, and we took $19 million off of our books by making that swap. Cleared out more money for the future, so we've got more optionality a few years from now potentially. And we got rid of all of the uncertainty about what Marcelo Meyer is actually going to look like on the other side of that injury. So a massive trade, a potential franchise altering trade. Interested in what you all think of that, but probably even more importantly, what you think the next steps should be for this team in the coming weeks. As I mentioned, there's still a lot of salary arbitration eligible guys that we need to figure out. We are still waiting on, I believe, haven't been following it that closely, but yeah, we're filling our team. We've got an offer out for a manager, offer still out for a pitching coach, and then another manager. But we've started filling most of the holes in our farm system. We've freed up some money. We've got a very good shortstop for the next 2 years. He's an aging veteran, but looking what he did last year, looking at his glove, I don't think he just falls off the face of the earth immediately in terms of his performance. I think he's going to give us a real nice performance at short next year for a much more economical price tag than we would have been at with Marcelo Meyer. So we're definitely changing the team. Whether we're changing the team for the better or not, we'll find out as we play through next season. But as I said, if you've got thoughts on the trade, would love to hear them in the comments. And even more interesting to me, if you've got thoughts on what we should continue doing in the coming weeks to potentially take some more salary off the books and make this team even more competitive for next season. Would love to hear your thoughts on those topics as well. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.